Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Bo Bennett, PhD, social psychologist, entrepreneur, author, producer, humorist, programmer, and many more things. Welcome to the show, Bo.
Thank you, AJ. Good to be here.
Thank you. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will be benefiting from what we are going to talk, the power of critical thinking. We'll try and understand that. But first, people would like to understand from you, Bo, how is it possible to do so many things at the same time, like so many things that I just, enumerated for the audience right now. How did you manage it? How did you manage your time? Did you do it with critical thinking, or did you just do it with very hard work?
I did it with a lack of sleep. Let's put it that way. That's my big secret. I sleep about 5 hours a night. Really, and I don't know why. I just can't sleep more than that. There's just so much I always want to do. I'm so excited. I get up at like 4 a.m. and I start doing things. So I have a lot of time. I work from home, so I don't have that kind of travel that I have to deal with. And especially at this point, I have 2 grown children, so I have a lot of time to do things I'm passionate about, and that's kind of my secret.
Absolutely, Bo. Absolutely, especially with that need to earn for work for money. When that goes out of the equation, then perhaps you sold your company for $20 million at the age of 29. So perhaps when you get into what you actually love to do, maybe even lesser hours of sleep compensates, or maybe you are made that way by God Almighty. So we will come to this is a good thing to understand about different people, and it looks like you have been bestowed with a lot of good luck and good physique from the God Almighty. Now, coming to the power of critical thinking, Bo, to understand in today's time when society wants you to be conformist almost in so many things, is critical thinking an advantage or a disadvantage in today's time? How would you like to put that?
For the most part, it's a huge advantage, because there are very few people, a very small percentage of the population, that really engages in deep critical thinking. And if you do, you have that kind of advantage over your competition, to be able to see things rationally, see things for the way they are. So for the most part, this is critical thinking is an advantage, especially in business. In business primarily, but when it comes to some personal, like your personal life, it may get in the way with conformity. Conformity is kind of a social bond, the cohesion that keeps us in groups and keeps us happy and keeps us in society. However, you could see how if somebody who thinks a little bit differently and doesn't want to fit in, doesn't want to believe what everybody else believes, to do what everybody else does, you could see how that could be a problem within that group or within that society. So in that case, critical thinking could get in the way, but you have to understand that, and you have to embrace it, and you have to understand that the benefits are better than the drawbacks. So it's worth pursuing.
Absolutely. So, Bo, just to understand from you, what is critical thinking in today's time? Is it the same it was that, say, 100 years back? Is it changing with times? And the whole aspect of understanding this is also changing along with that, with the way we are progressing, with now AI coming in, with the way businesses are working and working differently, with new ways of looking even at businesses.
Right. Well, critical thinking, I think, has changed in form over the years, but not in concept. And maybe if I could expound on that a little bit, the foundations of critical thinking always have been and always will be the same. It's basically understanding truth and looking for things that are true and how to confirm them as true, and understanding the way things work and working in congruence with the way things work. Whereas over time, we have learned a lot more about science, a lot more about social sciences like psychology and the way our brains work and the way our minds work. And so we take those ideas from science and psychology, and we can incorporate that into our critical thinking. So over time, we have, I think the best way to say it is we have been given more tools to have the ability to critically think better. And some of the tools would be the internet, access to the internet, access to this wealth of information. And then, of course, with AI, that's bringing in us in a new direction as well. That could help us out.
Right, right. So, in terms of as we are into the digital age, there is a lot of, truth and untruth floating at the same time.
Sure.
How do we utilize this critical thinking from separating fact from fiction? Because they say that if you speaking the untruth, lot many times again and again, keep on repeating, amplifying it, that becomes the truth, and the truth actually goes hidden. How does it work? How do we continue to be the right kind of critical thinker, because you are analyzing the facts? How do you continue to, in this world when there is so much of untruth floating, and you keep on analyzing the untruth and the truth gets lost? How does this work? Help us. You have written dozens of books, running a dozen of websites on this, and you are teaching several courses, if I understand, on critical thinking.
Right. So it comes down to asking questions. I think that is the number one rule when it comes down to it. So if for example, if you read online that person X did Y, you have to say, well, how do I know this? And if the answer is because I read it on Twitter or because I read it on some deep, dark website, then you're not critical thinking. Therefore, so I read it, therefore it's true. You really have to understand what evidence is and what makes something true. As you mentioned, if you say something and repeat it more, people tend to believe it more. But that doesn't make it more true. And there's a big distinction there. If you repeat a lie over and over and over again, it's still a lie and it's still false. The only difference is the perception, the fact that more people believe it and they believe it more strongly. So you have to understand the way your mind works and the way you believe things. And then you have to question it, and you have to be able to put yourself to the test and say, okay, well, why do I believe this? Should I believe this? What is the evidence for this? What is my reasoning for this? Was this something I was born believing and my parents told me? Were they right? So by asking these questions over and over, that definitely brings you to the road of critical thinking. And then the second part of that is understanding the nature of evidence, understanding what actually counts as evidence and what doesn't. Like some website or somebody who said something that's very like a low bar for evidence. And I think a better way of putting that is not what counts as evidence and what doesn't, but the different degrees of evidence. Because there are many different degrees of evidence. For example, like a testimony from somebody, from a person, third person testimony, that's technically evidence, but it's incredibly weak evidence. Whereas a systematic review is pretty much the highest level of scientific evidence there is. And that's when you would review like thousands of scientific papers on the same topic, and you put them all together and come to an ultimate conclusion. So you could see how that is like the gold star of evidence, whereas something on the way bottom isn't. And then you have to understand these different levels of evidence, what they mean, and then basically just kind of put it to the test when it comes to information, when it comes to questions.
Okay, so if we mutually agree to give a 5-star rating to each other, and does where does that stand? That is, how should people look at that? Because that may look like to be a 5-star review, but that is actually almost manufactured. And a lot of these things are happening in almost all spheres of life. People are, and it is a very acceptable norm on social media that you build a community and everybody keeps on promoting each other without the quality ever getting questioned here, because you got to it is part of the system.
Sure.
We cannot blame others. We are doing it as the it on a mass scale. Even when the creator economy, you see it. So how should you utilize that critical thinking to separate that real review, that analysis part, and put out that, okay, this is all a mutually manufactured review system in this particular area.
Right. So in the United States, we had or have, I don't know if it's still around, a game show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yes.
And I think there's something like that in India, right?
Absolutely. There was a movie also.
There's a movie, right? That movie, of course. One of the big Bollywood hits.
Yes. Yes.
So in that game show, there's a part where you could ask the audience. So if the contestant doesn't know the answer, you ask the audience. And the way this works is it's called like the wisdom of the crowds. The way that the crowd works is there are definitely going to be people who don't know the answer, and there are going to be people who know the answer. But when you're given a choice of like A, B, C, or D, then statistically, if more people are going to know the answer, like if people settle on the same answer, it will be right. It will tend to be right, like statistically, whereas the other answers will just be random because people don't know the answer. So that's like a really basic idea of the way wisdom of the crowds works. So when it comes to something like reviews on Amazon or ratings, it follows the same pattern. You could say, okay, I know that at least 10% of these reviews are totally nonsensical. They're just like manufactured, they're paid for, they're done by people in exchange for other reviews, whatever. I'm just guessing 10%, but you could say a percentage of that. But if there are enough reviews, then statistically there are going to be legitimate reviews as well. And that standard deviation or that average of the reviews, the legitimate reviews, will either bring up the fake reviews or bring down the fake reviews based on the average. So in general, reviews work when there's a big enough sample size. So I think when it comes to that specifically, you have to look at the number of reviews. You have to look at the context in which the reviews are being given, like you say, if somebody's exchanging reviews for other reviews. And then you also have to look at who controls the reviews. Like a review on Amazon, a product review or book review on Amazon means a lot more than a review on somebody's website where they have complete control over it. So those are the kind of critical thinking aspects that you have to consider when looking at reviews. And that's a good example because that's just one tiny, tiny implementation of critical thinking in the modern day workplace.
Right. Let's talk about the wisdom of the crowd, almost like a jury system, but more in a wider sense. Let's talk about the book, that particular play where Mark Antony gives a speech, Friends, Romans, and Countrymen. And he shows an imaginary bit of paper to the crowd that Julius Caesar, in his will, has given his money to you, some money to this. And the crowd goes berserk, and they go out and search. And they catch even a poet called Cinna, and somebody tells he is Cinna the poet. He is not the conspirator. And the crowd, when somebody in the crowd says, kill him, for he writes bad poems. Has the crowd become much more wise in today's time from that time to today's time?
I don't think so.
This work?
Yeah, I don't think so. People confuse wisdom of the crowds with opinion of the crowds. And that's two very different things. If you ask somebody, like, for example, like let's say you go into, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Let's say you go into like a Christian church and you ask people about God, they're all going to tell you pretty much the same thing. Why? Because they all believe the same thing. They're all in that same group. So again, it depends on who you ask, like who the crowd is. That's very important. And then it also depends on the idea of belief versus factual knowledge, versus like demonstrable knowledge that somebody could prove. So the fact that so many people believe in whatever doesn't make it true. And the more people who believe it, that's just appeal to popularity. They could be convinced, they could be manipulated, they could be misled. That doesn't matter. When it comes to wisdom of the crowds, you're dealing with factual information that people have access to. And then if they have that factual information, then you could take that and you could actually use it in a useful way. So that's the main difference is opinion, belief versus factual knowledge.
Wonderful, wonderful. It is good you brought the wisdom of the crowd into the discussion, Bo, because that is where everybody's pie lies in. Whether it is the political system, whether it is the business people, or is it or any sort of a thing that you say everybody. You are a social psychologist, and you also talk about the social psychology behind political division. Here we will also include the business part. You said actually you can get all the answers through asking the questions, right kind of questions, and that is what critical thinking is all about. But nobody wants to ask questions. That is where political systems, you see, is trying to control this very wisdom of the crowd through whatever means. You see around the world, don't want to take any particular place or politician or particular region, but see the state of affairs in the name of democracy, in the name of communism, in the name of whatever it is. But we can see the type of system of governance where the limit is very much there for all to see, to ask questions. Even in business, nobody wants you to ask questions. Everybody wants to throw every piece of information at your face, whether in the form of advertising, whether in the form of social media, because that is the most convenience for all things. In a time when nobody is allowing or giving that headroom for you to open your mouth and speak up, how do you utilize this power of critical thinking to actually get to the right decisions? How do you survive in these times of so many lies at the same time flying all over?
Well, once again, it comes down to asking the questions. And even if you can't ask the questions publicly for whatever reason, if you're in a suppressive type of government where questions are either frowned upon or sometimes could land you in jail, that's obviously becomes problematic to get information out to the general public. It's in some kind of suppressive type of environment like that. But that doesn't stop you personally from asking the questions even to yourself and looking for the answers. I think that everybody, no matter who you are and where you are, you can do that. And you could come to the mindset of that's probably closest to the truth by doing that. Even if some larger organization, whether it be a large business, a corporation, or a government, is trying to feed you information and trying to get you to believe a certain thing that isn't true. It's important, again, to think independently and to use critical thinking to come to the right decision.
Right, Bo. So in these times, whatever these times are, as we have discussed, there is a lot of talk about authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Can we be authentic? Can we be critical thinkers and still achieve success in whatever we intend to do in the present times?
Yeah, I see no reason why not. I think authenticity is very important in what you do, being honest with people, being upfront with people, being kind of who you are. I think now more than ever, and maybe it's a cultural thing, but definitely here in the United States, people appreciate differences more than they did in the past. Authenticity, different, unique voices, and that's what really helps you stand out of the crowd and be different. And I think, critical thinking plays into everything. There's no question about that. Being authentic is just another subpart of critical thinking.
there is much to learn from you, Bo, and I'm sure just this one discussion will not be enough for that. People will have to come and directly to you to read about your books, to also know more about you, your website. So how do they connect with you? How they can learn more about you?
You can find more about me at my personal website, which is bobennett.com. That's BOBENNETT.com. Or for my businesses, you could find all that at archieboy.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.